Fire Emblem is kind of a weird series for Nintendo standards. The earlier titles never released out of Japan, and when the series had its debut in the West, it didn't do all that well, albeit growing a small and very dedicated fanbase, and was on the verge of being pulled again in the early 2010s. And who could blame Nintendo? Being an uncharacteristically story-intensive game for the company, with lots of text to translate, these titles took a lot of work to bring to the West, and not many people played them. Until Fire Emblem Awakening came out and turned it into one of Nintendo's worldwide flagship franchises. What is good, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Backlog project, where we play through a gigantic list of games to find out which of them is worth putting onto your backlog. Got a game you'd like to see on the show? Check the description of the video to take part in our weekly poll, where you get to decide the next game I'll review. With the series now a staple in Nintendo's catalog, the company decided to do something very special for its 30th anniversary. An officially localized version of the very first Fire Emblem game from the NES. Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light, as a limited time, digital-only title on the Switch eShop. Severe FOMO has gotten to me, so I grabbed it on the last day it was available. Shame on me. And Nintendo for pulling that limited time release crap. Being the first in the series, this feels like a fitting game to also be my first Fire Emblem title. So let's lead our army to victory and slay a dragon when we ask the question, is Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light worth putting onto your backlog? Even though you can't buy it anymore, even if you wanted to, so I hope the answer turns out to be a no. Otherwise Nintendo fucked you over pretty hard here. For an NES game, Fire Emblem actually has a really cool intro. Not only is the iconic Fire Emblem theme playing, we also get a little info reel on all the classes in the game, with their stats, strengths and weaknesses, and even an animated sprite not otherwise shown in the game. Starting a new game puts us straight into the first chapter without any word on what we need to do, but at least we get treated to a story intro that is pretty in-depth and sets up a lot of plot points as far as NES games go. Our story begins with Marth, the protagonist and veteran Smash Bros. Fighter, fending off a pirate invasion on the island kingdom of Talis, which also happens to be the first chapter we get to play. The king, impressed by Marth's prowess in battle and knowledge of warfare, concludes that he is ready to fight the armies of Doluar, led by the Shadow Dragon Medeus and evil wizard Garnef, thus sets Marth out to rid the continent of Arcania of these wrongdoers and return peace to this war-ridden world. It's a pretty simple but good high fantasy story, filled with swords, magic, and dragons, but if you consider how much story your average NES game conveys, this is definitely a great one. This is further supported by the characters. While not incredibly deep, all of your units have some sort of backstory, a personality, and even a portrait when you inspect them in battle. This gives you a feeling of connection to your army and makes recruiting new members, as well as losing some due to poor strategizing, all the more engaging. Graphics are serviceable, but nothing to write home about, even for NES standards. There aren't any standout levels or scenes, everything just looks fine, but even the later stages don't bring many new visual elements to the table. The battle animations are the only thing really worth mentioning here. Watching your characters fight one-on-one against the enemy's units is fun to watch, but even that leaves a lot to be desired, with the battle screen always just being a black backdrop, no matter where the fighting actually takes place. Fire Emblem is well known for its great music, and even the very first title is no exception to that rule. I mean, that seems kind of obvious, what with the main title theme still being used in modern games even 30 years later, but still, Yuka Tsujiyoko really outdid herself on this score. Themes like Encounter, which is basically Marth's theme, still slap to this day and build the foundation for some of the best pieces of music in Smash Bros. Games, so thank you for that, Tsujiyoko-san. Fire Emblem combines the gameplay of a strategy game with the story and characters of a JRPG, blending together to form a game that doesn't rely on its plot to necessitate hours of grinding. Instead, the game offers you strategic gameplay that is simple on the surface, but has so many layers that build on top of each other that you can dig scarily deep into. Every unit in the game has a specific class, each with their own benefits and downsides. While a knight, for example, has great defense and attack stats, they are very slow, thus usually only attacking once per turn and turtling along the battlefield. A Pegasus knight, on the other hand, is fast enough to get 2 hits in against almost any unit and can not only move far, but over any obstacles, but doesn't have a lot of defense and gets annihilated by arrows. There are 22 classes in the game, some promoted into from base tier classes, like the mercenary class that turns into the hero with a specific item, kinda like Pokemon. Shadow Dragon also features different weapon types as well as multiple weapons of each of these types, which also all have unique stats like damage, hit and crit chance or range. In addition to that, the map also plays a large part in your strategy. See that mountain range with just one tile for units to pass through? Why not place a knight there to act as a wall for enemies to run up against, while your archers and mages attack them from behind your wall of flesh and metal? Or maybe you use your pirates and Pegasus knights to go through the sea for an attack behind enemies' lines, while your main army pincers them from the normal path? You can probably see there's a lot of elements in this game that you can strategize around, and since every map offers a unique layout, and you can only take a certain number of units into each of the chapters, you will definitely sit there, thinking about how to best use your characters to their maximum potential. There's just one problem. The game is a pain to actually play. You don't get nearly enough information, or rather, the information is there, but it's way too cumbersome to access. Rather than showing you where your enemies can potentially move so you can place your own units accordingly, the game makes you go to the stat menu of each enemy unit to check their movement stat and calculate their path on your own. And even that isn't entirely accurate because some tiles, like forests or mountains, take multiple points of movement to walk over. There also isn't anything that shows you how a battle might turn out before you actually engage in it. How high is your accuracy against the enemy? Will your attack even deal damage? Does your enemy have an unusually high crit rate? My hobby is running into a brick wall and hoping I don't die. The battle screen shows you all that information, but you cannot access that before the fight starts, so if you put yourself in a bad spot, you'll only know when it's too late anyways. Also, I firmly believe that the shown stats are not accurate. No way in hell can you miss that often on almost 100% hit chance. Fire Emblem also has a system to keep you on your guard and prevent just sticking to one strategy for the whole chapter. Reinforcements. At specific turns in each chapter, reinforcements start coming out of some castles on the map. Most of the time, this makes the chapters more interesting, and dealing with some unexpected enemies is often a great shake-up for your planning. However, while most of the time you just deal with the reinforcements and move on, in some chapters they just keep coming. Every turn, the game spawns the same set of enemies for way longer than it should, sometimes even without stopping at all. Usually, you can just place one of your units on the castle and block the spawn that way, but when the game throws more enemies at you than you can reasonably kill, you will get overrun quite fast. While we're on the topic of dying, Fire Emblem has a system that is pretty unique for a strategy game, but makes perfect sense in a character-based setting such as this: permadeath. If one of your unit dies in a chapter, they are dead forever. No respawning, no leaving the field until the next battle, only death. This means that you should be very careful in your approach, because even your best characters can easily die to bad planning or a lucky crit on the enemy's side, leaving you with not only a dead comrade, but also a lot of wasted XP, because there's no way to really grind in the game, making XP a limited resource. A stupid resource, by the way, because the way you level up seems incredibly unbalanced. You get XP for fighting and more for killing an enemy, but the level difference between you and your enemies doesn't really seem to matter, so it's always just better using your best units to plow through to make them even stronger. Healers also don't earn any XP by, healing. Instead, they can only earn XP by getting hit and surviving a fight. With healers being some of your weakest units, this is a very risky move, and I found it easier to just have my healers stand far in the back and running any units that need healing back to them instead of having them on the front lines providing direct support. So what do you do when you run out of units because they keep dying on you? The game has your back, so you don't have to start over just because you lost a unit here and there. Recruitment. Most of that happens in the course of the story. Your army meets some new people, their cause overlaps with yours, and they decide to join you, effectively giving you backup characters in case something bad happens. Some require a bit more effort though. When you scroll through the list of enemies on a map, you might sometimes see that one of them has an actual name and a portrait, instead of just being another soldier. This most likely means that they are recruitable by one of your characters by talking to them mid-battle. Though one of your characters part is very important here because you don't know who, meaning you will have to guess which character you can potentially just park next to an enemy to try and talk to them. To give you an example, Chapter 8 gives you the opportunity to recruit Roger by talking to him with Kada, your squishy Pegasus Knight. Why does he join you? Because he falls in love with her on the spot when they happen to talk and decides to desert to your army. Recruitment is a very cool idea and could be fun if executed properly. In this game, however, the sheer randomness of the dialogue and character pairings just makes it into a frustrating gamble that has you just sigh in relief when you finally find the right character, instead of being happy to find a new ally. The last thing I want to touch on is the itemization in this game. As I said earlier, there are multiple types of weapons ranging from swords, axes and bows to magic tomes and healing staffs. These all have a fixed durability and they will break after this count reaches 0. This means you can't just use your best weapon and plow through enemy after enemy, but have to be selective about which weapons to use so you don't end up fighting a boss and have him laugh in your face because your iron sword doesn't damage him. For item management, there are 2 types of tiles on the maps for your usage, shops and the convoy. Shops are exactly what they sound like, they sell you items. Depending on the shop you can find healing herbs, weapons and even magic to stock up. The convoy is where you get to store all the stuff you don't need right now, but you want to keep for later use. Characters can only carry 4 items at once, including weapons, so you will be using this a lot. I like the idea of having a storage that every character can access to trade items easily, but the problem is that it isn't really easy, with usually only one stationary convoy on each map, making you run your characters over to it every time you need something, and it only being usable by one character per turn because you need to be on the tile to use it. Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light has a few issues that drag the experience down quite a bit. There's definitely a great strategy RPG here, but it's buried by some cumbersome design choices that make navigating the game's many menus a chore. Some of that is remedied by the Nintendo Switch version giving you the ability to speed up the game or make save states, but that doesn't really fix the more fundamental issues like not having a pre-battle screen or reliable percentages. This is a game that is really only for the most hardcore Nintendo and Fire Emblem fans that want to brag about the fact that they played the very first Fire Emblem game. Like me. I've played the very first Fire Emblem game, so I'm way cooler than anyone who hasn't. What do you mean no one gives a shit? What are your thoughts on Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light? Did you get it when it was available and get right into it, or did you just buy it for the novelty? Maybe this review actually got you to want to try it out, and now you're sad that you can't buy it anymore. Nah, that wouldn't happen. If you enjoyed this review and want to help me appease to the mighty YouTube algorithm, and maybe spread this video to a few more people, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps out. Thank you. I'm also live on YouTube every Monday and Friday, so feel free to come by and say hi. Thank you very much for watching, and remember to always keep that backlog rolling.